this is my first time attending a summit here. And so I just want to compliment you and Richard and the folks here for putting this together. There's thousands upon thousands of PR people, armies of PR folks in agencies and in companies, and there's a very, very small dedicated few of people that actually really care about measurement. And it's really kind of, I feel like I'm in a tribe of some people that it's meaningful to me, because this is what I do all day. And so it's great to talk to other people that feel the same way. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's really pretty exciting about what we're doing is, you know, in succession, you've heard from the UK government, you've heard from GE, and now you're hearing from Microsoft. And all three of us are going to talk about a very, very different element of measurement and communications, which is, to me, really exciting because it's the whole industry is in front of us. And the whole opportunity of what we can do and how we can learn and how we can drive things differently it's actually really exciting to me to be a part of it. Just a little joke. My title is not the Senior Director of Platform Strategy. That's my old title when I used to run communications programs towards developers. But I never changed my LinkedIn title, which is a little bit of a confession considering Microsoft owns LinkedIn. The reason was one of the reasons was, as I took over this role a little over a year ago, I was warned that all of the social media monitoring vendors would start attacking me as soon as I changed my profile. So I made the choice to stay a little incognito. So maybe, I guess after this, the gig's up. And I will say, as somebody who's been working for a technology company, and I've been on both sides of a sales pitch, I understand the hard work that goes into that too. So I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I just mean to understand that we all are sort of balancing those different things. So I want to talk about two different aspects of how we think about measurement for the comms function at Microsoft. And it feels to me like most of what we talk about is really on on the left. Justifying the PR practice, quantifying our existence, putting together a whole lot of big numbers, putting PR in context. You know, we could talk about GRPs, we could talk about all those sort of marketing related terms and whether those work or don't work. Quite encouraging to figure out that we're moving on from that. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the right, which is how are we using comms measurement to drive better PR practice, which I think is an area that for us is really a big exploration. And to sort of give you an idea where we were, does anybody know here what a Mad Lib is? This may be too American for this audience, but Fritz knows it. So when you're growing up at a certain age, before you had technology in your car, before you had cell phones or video games that you could drive with, when you took a family trip, in my case, me and my brother would sit in the back seat of the car and do these things called Mad Libs, where one person would shout out things like, give me a noun, give me an adjective, give me an adverb. And then the other kid would give the answers. And then you would read this thing out and hilarity would ensue. And you would pass hours in a car driving to wherever your parents have decided to take you that summer. And we just did it on every trip. And when I started looking at all of our coverage reporting, it kind of felt like a Mad Lib, because all we really needed to do is fill it out. And we would fill it out, and if you guys happen to remember Zune, not one of Microsoft's proudest product launches, but we would just do this. We would fill it all out. And I don't know that we were learning anything. I don't know what these numbers mean. I don't know what 264 pieces of coverage mean. I don't know what 8,000 shares mean. So this became sort of a goal for me in taking over this role, to say, what are we going to do about it? And luckily, we've had a whole lot of change being created for us. We have a new CEO, and as of nearly 3 years ago, he gave us a new set of marching orders. And one of them was really towards driving a learning culture at the company, where he really wanted to use data and challenge us to say, we want you to make smarter decisions using the data that you have with a different set of approaches. And this became a rallying cry. And culture is a really hard thing to change. There's an old phrase which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I've been at Microsoft for 14 years, and I've never been more excited to be there because I see the culture change happening and I see the embrace that people are being a part of it, and I love being a part of that. So how do we use data to do better comms? And that's really what I've been focused on, and I want to share my remaining time with you to share a few lessons of how we've thought about doing it and the changes that we've been able to bring about. So the first thing that's really important is you've got to reorient your audience. Your audience is going to think about these things in terms of, give me the big numbers that I can plug into whatever reporting function that they need, whether you're in a marketing conversation or a line of business conversation. But what we're actually trying to do is do something else, right? We're getting beyond all of the coverage reporting and all of the monthly outputs and all of the big numbers to say, what can we learn, right? That's really the big change. And one of the first signs that I saw that this was a successful approach was I was presenting this to one of the CEOs directs, some of our findings, and he said after the meeting that one of the things he really liked was that this was one of the first times he's heard from Microsoft PR where we weren't telling him what a great job we had done. And it was very eye-opening to all of us that we could actually bask in that. That we weren't bad PR people because we'd had a set of outcomes that we weren't so happy with. We weren't exposing a vulnerability because we identified all of these areas for improvement. And it created a new opportunity for us to do some things. And the second thing that we did is we slowed down. So whereas in the past, we had to deliver all of our reporting in a much faster motion. In about 7 days from the end of the quarter, we would put out our quarterly reports. And I slowed that thing way, way down. So the third quarter report that we just shipped in 35 days, right? And for a bunch of, Microsoft is such a diverse business. We are in a few thousand pieces of news coverage every day. How can you get people to wait 35 days or longer to sort of get some new analysis? And we've had a decent amount of people that have said, this is too long to wait. But what we've been able to do is to demonstrate that the value of what we're doing exceeds the time, and that the lessons that you can learn from what you do provide more meaning. The third thing we've done is to really invest in visuals. Visuals are a great way, especially for busy executives, to really understand what we're doing. And one of the things that we're grappling with as a company is, how do you articulate to a multinational company that is organized by country that influence doesn't care about country, influence cares about language? Because influencers can live anywhere and speak any language, and in so doing will influence an audience. And if you can convince people that this is a Twitter map of looking at a Microsoft launch, and you could see that there's German, Spanish, Japanese, English, and you could see that those people, those populations exist all over the world. And here's just an example of Russian, French, and Chinese in Asia and Africa. And where those influencers sit, to me, matters a whole lot less than the language they're speaking. But for a large multinational, that's a really hard thing, right? We have 30 plus years of organizing ourselves around the revenue recognition that we do for each different country, run by a country manager who's got a revenue number and a sales team and so forth. How do you get people to reorient around this, right? And this is some of the work that we're doing. The other thing we're doing is consistent. We're driving really rich visuals. None of the stuff that we produce is sort of cut out of a template. Like, we are producing meaningful visuals that help tell a story. I would ask you guys, please don't tweet this. Like, I'm happy sharing it, but maybe just not tweet it. I've had to sort of sanitize a little bit to protect the lives of the innocent. But you'll see Microsoft compared to 2 competitors across 4 different types of coverage using 3 impact measures across North America and Europe. And when we get these numbers, the actual numbers don't maybe really matter that much. The big numbers, we got big numbers. You guys can guess who our competitors are. It's like, you know, the 5 of the biggest companies in the world. In this market, competitor B was kicking our butt, right? And why? Right? What happened in our 87% coverage in impact measure 1 was leading to a subpar outcome in the impact measure 3, whereas our competitor was actually driving real meaning in the blue zone and in the green zone. Again, it's a little harder when I can't give you the real story behind it, but this is what helps us start to reorient and think about, are we targeting the right types of influentials? Are we getting the right outcomes? Is our language resonating with some of the right people? Another thing that we've thought a lot about doing is trying to use social as a barometer for the success of our news cycles. So we've measured our news cycles in a lot of different ways. We've measured the reach, we've measured the coverage volume, we've measured the shares, how many times our story gets shared online. That's actually a really important thing when you think about approximately 60% of at least US, and I would say globally it's probably pretty close to similar, is consuming its news through a social feed, right? We're looking at things from a slightly different perspective, which is, are our news announcements, which are characterized by article volume at the top, are those generating appropriately sized social responses? And we have I think we have the luxury of being in an industry where there's just a ton of passion around technology for Microsoft and for its key competitors. And so we see these huge spikes where you'll see 200,000 tweets. I've actually done this graphic where the visual goes up to 1 million tweets for certain news announcements because it's just massive. But what we found is, look at the last Microsoft announcement all the way on the right, which was actually our biggest news disclosure from a coverage volume perspective, and yet the social response was a total whimper. And how can we learn from that? And how can we use that as a way to think about changing what our PR accountabilities are? Because it used to be that we were there to land the news, and that was it, job done, right? But now I think there's a different set of priorities, at least for us at Microsoft, which is you need to not only land the news in the coverage, you need to land the news with the audience. You need to inspire an action. And this is some of the ways in which we're learning and driving some of that. Slightly different view is we've learned that you can't become, and this is sort of an interesting comment coming from a technology company, you can't become too fast to rely too heavily on some of the technologies that you're basing your decisions on. So this is a look at, this is about 2 or 3 years ago where Microsoft had a fairly not smart announcement around changing some things for users with OneDrive, which is online storage. And so we started looking at the automated sentiment filters, and we looked at all of this sarcasm, and we kind of said, okay, this thing looks pretty good, right? This is a pretty good set of outcomes. And then we actually read the tweets, and we said, you know, maybe we need to tune this thing a little differently. It's not quite what we thought it was. And so sarcasm is one thing that's really hard. Like, natural language processing is really hard. And what it's caused us to do is to take a step back and say, how are we going to think about this a little differently? How are we going to understand these tweet volumes and then look at them in a way that's going to give us more insight? Similarly, you can think about not just sarcasm, but individual words. And I had a good conversation with Barry and with David earlier about the word okay. And the word okay is, first of all, the word is less than 200 years old. And yet it is the most widely understood word in the world, at least believed to be. And yet, what does it mean, right? If you're in Great Britain, it means something maybe slightly a little less positive than it does in the United States, right? In Great Britain, and you guys can feel free to agree or disagree, it's kind of like when you say you're okay, it means like your dog died, but you're here at work today and you just don't ask any questions. I'm okay. I'm going to get it done. Just leave me alone, right? But I think even in Britain, there's probably 3 or 4 different other meanings of okay that are also maybe worse, maybe better. And in the United States, we tend to be a little bit more forwardly positive, glass half full. So okay tends to mean something a little bit more positive. So as you think about okay, like what happens when you change the colors? Like, what does it mean to have okay in green or an okay in red? And how do you measure that? How do you think about the word okay in the context of thinking about your coverage and what it means for you and how you interpret that and what you learn from it? Because it gets hard, right? But what's hard gets to be sort of the meaning and what it brings out. So the last thing that I just want to leave you with is I'm thinking about this in terms of going from a position of taking credit, where we're really measuring and inspecting, to a position of taking action. And that's not to say that there's something bad about the first one, because it's actually really important. And we are a nascent niche within an established industry. And so we need to continue to take credit, and we need to continue to demonstrate the value proposition that we're going to have. But we also need to take some action and drive a better set of outcomes. I like to think about my work as taking a set of backward-looking probabilities and using it as a means to take some forward-looking possibilities. Because nobody really wants to look back only to look back. They want to look back to look forward. We talk about it as a team doing the courageous dive into meaning. And that means you've got to really work the data. You've got to really understand it. We've created an entire Scrum process, which is about 2 weeks long, where the entire team gets together and just stares at slides for multiple days, trying to understand this thing. Asks for looking at things different ways, grabbing, this slice of Excel, what's it going to mean? How can you run regression against 2 different variables that's going to actually show you some meaning? And that exercise is a courageous dive into meaning. And then lastly, we really want to focus on transformation. What are we doing that's going to be different? Not what is the activity that we're trying to capture on behalf of the business. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'll take a few questions.
Thank you, Jamin. So front row, please, microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Marion here with a question for you. I loved what you said at the end about backward-looking probabilities to define your forward-looking possibilities. What new skill sets have you sought out to make this happen?
Patience.
I was referring to things that you said you bring in a lot more data visualization now. What other kinds of skill sets? Predictive skill sets, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we've brought in people with some design expertise to help us out. We brought in an expert on data visualization to actually come and work with the team and get some thoughts down. I think the main thing that we've done differently is we've kind of taken the time to stop what we were doing and think about it. Like, you know, we have some of our best thoughts, like when we're doing something other than what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like, I come up with really good stuff, like when I'm walking the dog, right? Other people say that, like, like being in the shower is one of the most creative moments of the day for you, right? Because, you know, you're there and there's nothing to distract you, and you can get in your head. And, like, that's the process that I think we've brought to this, right? Which is what we said, there's a certain amount of days that you need to compile and aggregate and clean up your data, and that's at the front. And then there's a certain amount of time at the end, which is to build the slides and finish everything and make it look pretty. And if you take those two bookends and you put them too close together, nothing happens in the middle. And the stuff in the middle is actually where the magic tends to occur. Like, what does this really mean? And I can go stare at stuff all day, and then I'm driving home from work and I figured out what it meant, right? And then I have 15 more questions for the team, for them to help me figure out, was my assumption right? You know, am I just, you know, participating in confirmation bias? Because if you torture the data long enough, it will confess. And it's true. But make sure it's confessing to what it should be confessing to, not confessing so that it moves on. Like, beware of your confirmation bias, but torture the data, because it will get you where you need to go.
That's the soundbite of the summit so far. Torture the data long enough, it will confess. Love it. One more question out here, please. Jamin's come all the way from Seattle, which is a long way.
Hello.
So, question, I can hear a voice.
Hi. Actually, two separate questions. I find your role quite interesting. So I'm trying to understand a little bit better in terms of your team and what you do and the expertise that you bring.
Okay.
Is this essentially a data science or data analytics expertise that you bring?
Yes.
And is this and how big is the team or the resource just looking at analytics and insights? So that's one. Second question is on the reporting that you do.
Hold on, please. Sorry, not to be rude. Let's deal with the first question.
Yeah.
It's easier.
From a Microsoft employee perspective, I am the least data science expertise person on my team. I have other people that actually are much better at some of this stuff than I am. I am a comms guy that happens to be good at math. They are people with master's degrees in data science that work for me and work on this. We also take a huge dependency on agencies and vendors. So Gorkana/Cision does a whole ton of work on our behalf. In the US, we have our PR agency that works on it. Microsoft's always had a whole lot of agency support and a pretty high ratio of agency to Microsoft employee balance. So the whole collective team, I don't know, I want to say 8 or 9 people full time, and then other people float in and out based on how we need them.
And the second part of your question?
Hello.
Yeah.
The reporting that comes in 45 days later, I mean, the work that we've done in slowing down the reporting, how is the insights coming from there timely and relevant for something that you can act on in the future?
Yeah. So part of what we decide to work on is we look forward in the calendar at potential new opportunities, disclosures, key markets. I don't know if you noticed that not too long ago, Microsoft made a big announcement around education and support for education for both schools and institutions as well as for students. And one of the things that we've been working on as a team is how do we get a lot of smarts about that launch and about that market in a way that we can do the next thing with some better understandings. So we kind of look at the calendar and we kind of say, where can we focus our energy that's going to bring the next big thing? We have both the luxury and the burden of, Microsoft will announce 5, 10, 15 things on a single day, all in disparate businesses, everything from, Xbox to Windows to Office to IT infrastructure, and all have different sets of influencers. And so we can move in our swim lanes and then sort of come together as a company for a couple key moments? How do we use what we know and looking forward, say, how are we going to impact that set of decisions?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. Real pleasure.